All right. So welcome everyone to another episode of the Omar Pinto Coaching Podcast. And today we have Sterna Suissa joining us on the show. Sterna is a parent and coach to dozens of parents just like you. Parents that would do anything to ensure the well-being of their child and who understand and accept them for their authentic self. Over the past several years, Sterna has helped dozens of parents build deep emotional connections with their children. Her work enables you as a parent to create a calm, loving home where you can build a strong bond with your child. Sterna is committed to helping you with your feelings of frustration, despair, and disappointment that hinder the relationships between you and your child. She will show you how to build the kind of healthy, strong relationship with them that lasts a lifetime. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there is.
Welcome, Sterna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure. We've got a beautiful friend in common, Ruth Levita. So a little shout out to Ruth. Love you very much. And so she put us together, and I'm excited because I coach so many people, so many individuals in the Jewish community that come from very large homes or very large families. And the theme in many cases is just not being seen, not being heard. In many cases, senses of feeling disconnected, abandoned, lots of trauma growing up that one might not anticipate because it's such an abundant home, 7, 9, 10 kids, right? But the children stop being children very quickly and start becoming parents very quickly. So in many cases, they're just deprived of their childhood. So this is kind of the topic that I wanted to jump into with Sterna. So Sterna, please, give some of my listeners a little bit of unpack that for them to help them navigate their own family.
Yeah, I first off just want to start off by saying, when talking about such a topic, we might have a parent who's listening to us and maybe has 7 to 9 kids and maybe feels like, oh, does this mean that I cannot provide properly to my kids because I have so many? And I'm a strong believer that there are ways. I'm not anti having big families. I think there are ways to have a large family. I think there are things to think over, like such as, is your marriage a strong one? I think that is priority, right? Like, are you and your partner together in a healthy relationship, and you guys each know how to express your needs and you're there for each other and there for the kids together? Or are you a mother that is overwhelmed and then on top of that has 9 kids? So there are many factors like that. And also I think household duties help, like having somebody in our house come and help with the laundry, help with the cleaning, help with the household, how it's running, versus a lot of times when parents don't have that, it falls on the kids. The older one needs to take care of household duties that are really taking away from their childhood. They should be out biking, and instead they're inside doing household chores because their parents decided they wanted 9 kids, but it falls on them. So I just want to first acknowledge that, because I have a lot of friends that have a lot of kids and they might be listening to this, and I want you to know, and I want them to know that, there is a way to have a functional home with also multiple children. And we just need to be conscious about it. That's the most important, and not just going with the flow, especially in religious communities. There's a lot of pressure and actually competition around who has the most amount of children.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it's really a lot of women I know have this pressure of, their friend has more or they should have more, and versus really checking in with themselves. How do you feel? And also another thing is that, when talking about multiple children, I think a lot of times, when a mother says, oh, I want to have another child, they think of it just as like a baby. But really, we need to think of all the stages. Are you ready for another teenager? Are you ready for another adult? Are you ready for, all the stages that this human being will need you by their side for? It's not just a baby. So thinking of like the bigger picture, so that's just in regards to when we talk about having a big family. But back to what you mentioned, being in a large family and not feeling seen and heard, it's really interesting because I grew up with only one brother and I didn't feel seen and heard, so I strongly, like, back to what I said before, like, it has to do more with the actual parent also versus how many children. And also having multiple children can also play an effect if a parent, let's say, has the desire to emotionally connect with each child and, for example, can't physically do that for so many factors in their life. So back to this need of feeling seen and heard, each of us have it. And I think that it's, when we're not given this in our life, we go into adulthood with this void inside of us that many of us don't understand. Like, why don't I feel good? I don't feel good. And a lot of us will start doing things to compensate this void we feel inside. I know for many years, I had a serious addiction, and it was a shopping addiction. I would always have to buy something. And as soon as that thing was used, it was no longer giving me that benefit of having something new. And I would go out and buy something and buy something. My closet was stuffed. And like, it would just give me the sensation of like a good feeling, but it wasn't. It was this void that I was trying to, fill up. And I think that when we're not seen and heard as a child, it follows us through our whole life, like, it's so deeply inside of us. And even more so when you become a parent and you have that void, like I became a parent with that void inside of me. I wanted my kids to fill that void up. Like, you better listen to me. Nobody ever listened to me in my life. Nobody ever saw and acknowledged me. So I would be like, my daughter better do that for me. Like, she better start listening to what I have to say. This is all unconsciously, right? Like, totally unconscious. But that void of not being seen and heard, like, it could be really deep, and it could affect us in many, 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 many different ways,
Well, it helps me understand my mother a little bit better because there's this, as you were saying that, I wasn't felt seen or heard. So now I want my children to see me. Okay. And I've also, which we can caveat in any direction, but there's also this feeling that I've coached many women where it was like, I was my mother's confidant. She would tell me things that I was not old enough to process. Okay. Maybe in some cases, she was either angry with her husband, which is her father. Right. So there was like, she would come and complain. And so she became the yet again, the parent to the parents.
Oh yeah. The roles.
So there's another layer.
Yes. The roles can flip. When we have this need of being heard and seen, we then might unconsciously demand it from our child. And then we want our child to be that person to us. And then we're repeating the pattern because now they aren't the ones being seen and heard because we're expecting this from them towards us. And if our child doesn't provide that for us, then it can really trigger us even more than usual because it's again, oh my gosh, like again, I'm not being heard and seen by another person I'm in a relationship with. So yeah,
as we talk about, as we unpack this, right, it feels like all of a sudden, how long has this been going on? Because it feels like generationally, right, this has just been perpetually repeating itself over and over again. And then there's this swap in roles within the home consistently, like the child being the parent to the parent, the child being the parent to the children, right? And the parent not feeling seen and heard by their own children, okay? So they're re-traumatizing themselves because they're not getting what they need from their children, and then their children aren't getting what they need from their parents. So it's like, right?
Yeah.
There's so much confusion.
Yeah, and there's this lack of boundaries, right? Like everybody, like basically the kids, when a parent isn't capable of providing for the child, to be seen and heard. Sometimes the child will then start looking at the older sibling, right? Like, can you see me? Can you hear me? And that, and if a parent sees that it's, like the older one can very quickly slip into this like caregiver role for the younger ones. I happen to have, my eldest is 10, my youngest is just turned 3. And oftentimes I see how, she'll be like stepping in to do something because she's capable, because she's 10. And I kind of have to say, this is not your role. I'm here for your sister, because very easily kids, care for each other. And so if they feel like my mother's not able to be here for my sibling, because, they're such, they're so good inside and they want to be there in a way that, the parent isn't, so they'll step in. So if, let's say I'm busy doing something and, my youngest one needs something, then I see my 10-year-old stepping in and I'm like, oh, it's okay. I got this. I heard her and I'm here and it's okay. This is my role, So we kind of have to be on top of it, because very easily it can just slip into that, where the older one becomes this caregiver. And I think that it's a lot for the eldest, because they also need us in the way that the younger ones need us too. Just because they're in a bigger body doesn't mean that they need us less. Sometimes they need us more. Like, like sometimes it's easy as parents to be like, okay, like, just more, we're physically providing for the younger ones more often. We're getting them dressed, we're getting them undressed, we're doing things physically. So, oftentimes we're being more physically affectionate to the younger ones. And the older ones, because they could shower on their own, get dressed on their own, feed themselves, we kind of like take a step back. But really, they need us. Like they need us. And I think it could be really hurtful also, because they see how much we're doing for the younger ones and kind of like, oh no, you're old enough, you're big enough, you're good on your own. But that's not reality. Like they really, we don't grow out of needing to feel seen and heard by our parents. We always need it. Some adults still crave it and are searching for that in their life,
I would say all of them are. I think once you've done this work, okay, therapy, coaching, counseling, okay, personal development, right, where you start to understand things. One of the first assignments that I give to my clients is the drama triangle. So I send them the drama triangle to help them understand the dysfunctional codependent roles that we will fall into. If they find their way to me, chances are they've been in that triangle where they're either the victim, the rescuer, or the aggressor, right? And they will play one of those roles throughout their life. First within their first family, right? Their original family as a child, and then as a parent. Okay, it kind of perpetuates, just like the needing to be seen and needing to be heard. So I'm curious, because you only have one sibling and you are Jewish. Okay. So I'm curious as to A, how that happened. And then B, right, I would assume I'm still not being seen, not being heard, which is like it feels like an epidemic on its own. So tell me unpack that a little bit for us. Why only 2 kids, and for what reason did you feel unseen and unheard?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to understand that me and my brother, I think, are like 11 months apart. So it was very much back to back. Very much something like, the religious, circles that I grew up with. It's very back to back children. I believe I'm only 2 siblings because my parents got divorced. Otherwise, I probably have more siblings back to back. My parents got divorced, and I actually lived with my father. He had full custody. So my father, being a man with 2 kids on his own, I could understand, today as an adult, why I wasn't seen and heard by him. And also looking at the way he was raised, and understanding where he comes from has allowed me to accept that my father will actually never see me or hear me till today, as much as I try. My biggest challenge today is actually, as something I'm working on continuously, is when we're not seen by the adults in our lives growing up, we tend to see our own self, the way they see us. The issue is they never saw us. So we tend to not be able to see ourselves because they never saw us. So that is, my current struggle. But I think healing brings you on a journey where at first you might feel a lot of anger towards your parents, and then you might try to get them to see you and then be deceived even more, until you come to a place of acceptance. This is what it is. And when you accept it, I think you can move forward. And after I've accepted it, I started to question my father more on his life and see where he's coming from. And I just have so much compassion for him. I feel like, wow, like a whole entire life that he's never been seen or heard by his parents. And yeah, like I feel blessed that I am breaking that cycle, and have come to realize what I have realized. And sometimes it's challenging. And also it's liberating to know that no matter where we come from, no matter our experiences, we get to choose how to continue to live on,
So curious.
Are you frozen? Oh,
no,
okay.
No, we're good. So curious. No, I was like, I'm deep in just listening there. So, also questions are coming to my head, right? So 2 questions. So for what reason did your parents get divorced? And then number 2, why did you go with your dad instead of your mom?
Yeah, so those are some big questions.
I know.
Yeah, it's some big questions, and I don't have all the answers because each parent has a different narrative. Each one is telling me different things. And I've accepted that each one has their reality. For me, my parents got divorced. I was 1 year old. So I was really, really young. So I don't know enough. Like I wasn't conscious enough to remember why they got divorced. I think, my father was a religious man. He was set up. So this was like a arranged marriage. I think he trusted whoever set him up. I don't think there was many meetings before or questioning before. My mother had a previous marriage before my father. I think she also had other kids before my father. So I think all of that weighed heavy on my father once he actually got married. He realized he wasn't capable of handling all of that. My mother was going through a lot. So that explains why my father took custody of us. My mother was also taking care of 3 other kids with her ex-husband. Things were complicated. So all of that, my father just wanted to take us away from that and give us the most peaceful childhood without a lot of chaos and dysfunction. And yeah, that's why, my father doesn't really talk much about, his divorce, or if I ask him things, he'll give me like facts, but he's not going to open up his, emotions or what he went through, or yeah. So I'm kind of also assuming and guessing that things were really challenging for him.
And your relationship with your mother, what's your relationship with your mother like?
So the relationship with my mother is, I have a relationship with her, but it's obviously different when you're not raised by her, Yeah.
Okay. So we'll leave that.
I could go on and on, but we could stay on topic.
The thing is that it's important to understand where it all comes from, right?
Yes.
So how long have you been helping parents? How have you been in this field?
For about 5 years now.
Okay. So prior to that is you becoming yourself, is you learning your own gifts and talents and moving into that direction. So what was your trajectory like? What inspired you to get into this type of work?
So at the time, I feel like in life, our calling comes to us. And I would meet a lot of women with kids that they were having a hard time connecting with, and they kids that were misunderstood by the school, by the parents. And I actually went to this organization in Montreal. It's a nonprofit organization, and I opened up a department there for individuals that were misunderstood by their parents and their schools and their communities. So back to like talking about religious communities, it was a lot of them coming from religious communities. And they've decided, you know, in religious communities, if you are not a certain way, a lot of people won't accept you. Like schools and parents will have a hard time. There's many layers and it's very complex. And a lot of individuals, it's very black and white. It's or you fit in or you don't. And if you don't fit in, then it's like you have to enter this whole other world aside from your community. You have to, you know, live like kind of like be on your own. And so I opened up this organization for individuals. Most of them were men, from individuals that would leave their communities. And a lot of them never got the opportunity also to finish high school because the schools would kick them out of schools. So it was like a program where we would like talk about life things and also for them to get their GED and, you know, give them the opportunity they never received in their childhood. When doing that, and also at the same time healing my own journey, taking courses, reading a ton of books, getting educated, and also interacting with these individuals, it just hit me that the root of everything is parenting, and that I need to share what I know with parents, because if these boys, their parents knew what I knew, I'm sure that their journey would have been different. You know, a lot of us don't have the education or understand each other as humans. It's awful to think about it, but because we go to school for so many years and we aren't given any courses on, you know, attachment styles, emotional intelligence, how to communicate effectively with another human being. Like there's so many things that we lack, you know. So yeah, and then I started giving courses in my house, and my house would be packed. Like parents want to learn, parents want to know. And especially if you come from a childhood where you have a lot of pain inside of you, you don't want to repeat that. You want to give, you know, a different upbringing for your child. And so a lot of parents, you know, a lot of us have been raised by emotionally immature parents. And a lot of us enter adulthood with a baggage, you know, with burdens, with things that we need to unlearn and things that we need to learn. And so we don't want to repeat that for our children. And so I think that we are now in a generation where a lot of parents actually want to do better. And it's really inspiring to have seen my house be so filled. And then I just kept doing it. And then I said, you know what, like I need to reach more parents. And the only way to do that is if I show up on social media. And so I did that. I said, I'm going to start sharing myself. And so, yeah, it's been a really nice journey. And I'm very humbled to be part of this for so many parents that. Yeah.
Sterna's got a huge following on Instagram. How many, over 100,000 followers? How many you got on there now?
Yeah, a little over that. Yeah.
So the word that came up to me, which I think is super important, and I think it's also has a strong religious connotation as well, which is exiled, right? So as you were talking and I was listening to you about how you either fit in or you don't fit in. It's very black and white, this whole thing. So there's this, and I know that in my own childhood healing work, right, there was like the exiled child or the exiled member of the family, right? So as you know, when I say the word exiled, and as far as the people that you've worked with, what has been your experience even with that word or that topic?
Yeah, I think, and you know, I'm going to share, because a lot of those individuals, they became literally like friends to me, literally friends. And they would share things with me. And a lot of them don't want to be completely exiled, like you said, out of their community and out of their homes. A lot of them are looking for that gray zone of, could I be myself and still be loved by my family? And how can we make that happen? You know, I'll never forget, I had asked an individual, I said, if you can have one thing right now, whatever it is you want, what would it be? And he looked at me without even a doubt, like this was the thing he wanted. He's like, I just want to have a Shabbat meal by my parents' house. And I'm like, wow, like if only your parents knew that, because it's so black and white. Like, because you aren't, complying with certain things, then the parent thinks like, oh, that's it. This child, doesn't want to have anything to do with us. They don't want to live this life. They don't want, but it's not true. A lot of children are still finding themselves, and we need to always keep our home open to that and not be in this black and white, and understand that there's a lot of gray in life, but these kids aren't given that opportunity for so many reasons. Also, like you mentioned, back to the, big family, one of the main concerns of parents of big families is influence between siblings, right? Like, what if this child is going to influence the younger ones? We can't have them around. And I always tell parents, the strongest influence in a home is not the eldest. It's us. We're the eldest. If you want to look at who's the oldest in the home, it's us. It's not your child. Like, you be that example to your kids,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But now this is what I love here. Well, first I want to say two things. Because I work with so many coaches, with so many Jews, and not only that, I also come from a very religious, and I'm going to use the word, I feel that I came from a very religiously oppressed family. Okay. So my mother's a Jehovah's Witness, still a Jehovah's Witness. Okay. And my father stopped being a Jehovah's Witness when I was probably about 10. Okay. So my mother was in charge of our religious upbringing. And so for the next 8 years, I would go to Kingdom Hall. I would go to, our religious organization, or it's called the Kingdom Hall. For you guys, you have synagogue, we have Kingdom Hall. And so I remember when I was 16 years old, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not who I am. Right. My mom said, well, until you're 18, I'm just asking that you, just follow through. I said, I'll follow through until I'm 18. Okay. But then I want the ability to step out. Right. And on my 18th birthday, I was like waiting for my 18th birthday so I could come out. Right. And so there is this, for me, I didn't have a connection to the religion the way Jews have to their religion, because there's so many facets to it. It's not just about, it's more simplistic. The Jehovah's Witness upbringing is more simplistic as far as what your duties are, and as far as the community goes. But one of the things that I remember that a lot of my clients would say, it's like, I want to be myself, which is one of the topics here. Could I just be myself and still be accepted? Right. But man, I'm so afraid of leaving my community because of, I love Shabbos, right? There's this beautiful, and I've experienced Shabbos a few times with my own clients, and it is such a beautiful custom, coming together as a family, sharing meals, right? Turning off all electric devices, like, focusing on rest, focusing on community, focusing on sharing, right? So that's the beautiful aspect of it. So one of the things that I am inspired by, or what I do love and enjoy, is that idea of how tight-knit the community is. On the flip side, it's when they discuss the absolutes, like the rules, then it reminds me very much about how I was raised. This is how it is. It is only this way, and there is no gray, and there is no wiggle room. This is how it is. And if you do not follow this, you will be punished, right? And that is, I could never get behind that ever, this idea that if I don't do things exactly the way I am told to do them, I will be punished. So I couldn't get behind that. So I'd love for you to unpack a little bit about how you either talk to the parents, right? Or even talk to adult children, right? About this sort of either being, number one, being yourself. And then number two, the fear of missing out on the things that they do enjoy about the religion because they don't agree with certain parts of the religion.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. One thing that I that has, that one thing that I tell religious parents is, you're doing things for God, right? Like, you're doing things for God. And don't forget along the way that your kids are God's creation. So while you're serving God, don't shame God's kids, because what are you, like, how is that serving God? You know what I mean?
Like that. Yes.
Like, if somebody is truly God-fearing and religious, then we have to understand that our kids are not ours, right? We're taking care of them.
Beautiful.
They're God's creation. So in the midst of serving God, don't shame God's kids, because I don't think that that's what God wants. I think the most, the one thing God does want is for us to love all of his kids unconditionally, just the way they are. And it's not for us to decide what type of journey our kids are going to have. That's not our decision. So that I think is something that, is very powerful for parents to understand, especially if you have religion in your home. And when it comes to the actual child, a lot of kids will actually hide parts of themselves when they want to do, when they want certain aspects of the religion, and they know that it's very black and white. So you're just not going to know everything about your child, but it's not your child's not going to, not do these things. They're just going to do it behind your back. Mm-hmm. So you just have to ask yourself, right? Like, do I want to have a safe, open relationship with my child? Or is my child just going to do that behind my back and I just won't know about it? And reality is that kids need our support. They need to feel seen and heard, right? Back to what we were saying. Mm-hmm. So if we put our child in such a position, then they're just going to be left alone with what they decide to do in secrecy. And it's an awful feeling for a child. I mean, I used to hide a lot of things growing up. I used to leave my house with a skirt and then pull it all off and pull off all my clothes and hide and it's really intense. Nobody wants to go through that. It just doesn't feel good.
It doesn't, because when we talk about trauma, trauma is twofold. Well, it's manyfold, but one of the facets is what actually happens to you, the traumatic event that happens to you. And then not having the right person to unpack that trauma with, because the younger you are, and the younger you are when you experience trauma, the less apt you are to be able to effectively communicate what that trauma is, because you don't even understand what's happening to you, right? Yeah. But there could be a sense of embarrassment, there could be a shame, sense of fear. So there's all these different elements associated with it. But what we're talking about here is when you're hiding things and we're in secret, that is trauma, because I am doing some things that I don't feel good about. Okay. So it's creating negative feelings within me. And then I don't have anyone to say, hey, listen, I'm doing these things, right? Because I want to, I'm inclined to behave in this manner, but something about my behavior is making me feel uncomfortable and I need someone to talk about, and there's no one to talk about. I have to consistently keep secrets. So what that does is now it becomes sort of an addiction too, because I have to self-soothe myself from this actual behavior, which could be more of that behavior. What I come across too is a lot of porn addiction in the community as well. So there's that need for self-soothing. So there's either alcohol or drugs or porn or whatever the case may be, but there is a need to self-soothe because I don't have access to someone who can hold space for me properly. So that was a lot too. So as I unpack that, how do you help individuals? Because there's going to be the adult children that are challenged with this, and it's also the parents. What would you say to them about that topic, right? And helping them navigate these topics with their children.
Yeah. So the first thing, like let's backtrack, let's say, to a parent with a child in the early years. Can I be myself and still be loved? This can start so young. Like, for example, a child, let's put religion aside. Let's say, for example, a child is angry about something. Okay. They're going to start kicking and throwing things. They're really angry. And the parent says, hey, you know what? Go to your room. Like, that's it. Go to your room until you stop, until you come back out with a smile. Right. So the child early on starts to see, oh, there's certain things about me that my parent isn't capable of seeing and hearing that I need to hide. So when a child is young and we do that to them over and over, they become a teenager, and then they, go into their room, they shut themselves down. And then the parent asks themselves, why isn't my child coming to me? Now, here's the thing. When a child is young, they fully depend on us. They can't call a friend. They can't go out. They can't nothing, right? We are the ones to see and hear them. But as our child grows older, there's other individuals that they can turn to, because we have this need that never goes away. So let's say as a teenager, they're going to shut themselves in their room and then through social media, try to feel seen and heard, let's say, with a friend or a call or whatever. So this whole, seeing our child and hearing our child, it needs to be done from when a child is young. And if it wasn't, then we need to repair what wasn't provided, right? There's always room for that repair. So going to a child, even if they're a lot older, and saying, hey, I wish I was able to be there with you, even through your anger, even through your frustrations, even through your tears. And I wasn't, and I wish I was, and I want to be there for you now, and kind of listening to how the child felt and repairing what was done. So basically your question was discussing how to accept a child and also show them their love no matter what. Was that your question?
I got stuck here right now where you said, you have to catch it when they're young, right? Or you can repair when they're older. And then you said, I wish I was there for you when you were younger. And I got sucked into it. As you were talking, I felt it. Okay. So there was I think I actually had a frozen moment where I was it was, everything went blank, and I could actually feel that love. I could feel that compassion, which tells me that's still a need of mine. Right.
I love that you share this with us, because we have to talk to ourselves in that way also.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We need to, we have to accept that maybe our parents will never provide that for us. And then as adults, we need to reparent ourselves, right? We need to show up that way and tell ourselves every time that, let's say, we betrayed our own self, we didn't listen to how we felt, we ignored, we, invalidated our own self and criticized ourselves. We can tell ourselves that, right? I wish I was there for you. I wish I didn't do that. I wish I showed up for you in a loving way instead of bashing you, So I think, I think this is the beautiful pivot in the conversation, because what we've been discussing up until now is the events. We've been discussing trauma. We've been discussing not being seen and not being heard. But now all of a sudden we're kind of this is practical application, right? And just by you saying that to me, I felt it, and it took me somewhere. It literally had an experience where it was man, I think I still need to hear that, right? And so number one, I think that this right here, as far as being a parent, this is kind of in the part of the podcast where you take a pause, you take a break, and you go, I can do this. I can actually go to each one of my children, right? Recognizing my own shortcomings, right? And say, I don't know if I have or have not seen you or truly heard you or made you feel that way. But if I haven't, I wish that I did, right? And so as I unpack that for my own children, that repairing is also a word that in 12-step recovery is called making amends. Yeah,
so
exactly.
a lot of times when we say, I am so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, it's missing something. Okay, because I'm sorry is just an acknowledgement of my wrong, but am I doing anything about it? Right. So the amend part is, how can I make this right? And so real change has to happen. Go ahead. I can see the wheels turning.
I love that you mentioned that, because whenever I share about repairing, I actually don't even use the word sorry. It's not about the words. It's about the actions. It's about listening. And it might be painful for a parent to hear an older child share with them the ways they needed us and that we failed to show up for them. Like, there's no going back. You know what I mean? And no matter how old our child is, I believe it's never too late. You know, even as no matter how old, because a lot of us still wish our parents could just admit that they didn't know our experience growing up. And the reality is that I don't know how my kids are experiencing their childhood. And I will never know unless they share it to me. I'm doing my best on my end, but I know that one day my kids are going to share what it was like for them, because we don't know. We don't know. We might have also the best of intentions, but they don't live those intentions. You see, they live our actions. They live what they see.
Yes.
They live our words. They live what we actionably do for them. So as much as, you know, my kid doesn't live the love I have in my heart, I need to show that to her. So, you know, like, deep down, I know my father loved me, but did he show that to me? You know what I mean? So that's where often there's this disconnect, because us parents, especially if they're emotionally immature, they'll be like, but I did this and I did that and I did. Yes, you might have done all that, but now I need to share how I experienced all of that. So being open to that is so important. And our kids have all the answers for us. They will share with us what they wish we are capable of providing them. They will share with us. If I ask my child, how can I show up for you? How can I help you when you're going through a challenge? How would you like me to, you know, what do you want from me? What will make you feel like I am here for you? Each child will answer. They will answer, you know? So if we're open to listening, and sometimes it could be hurtful, especially to our ego, very, very hurtful. So be open to, we're human. We're all imperfect. I know my kids are going to have things to work on, for sure. Without a doubt. I know that they will have things to also work on. And every generation does. There's no such thing as, you know, perfection, because we're all human. And just accepting that, you know, I'm willing to listen to my child. I'm willing to validate their experience. And even if I validate their experience, it doesn't mean that my experience as a parent is wrong. You see what I mean? Let's say I show up for my child a certain way, and then my child says, you don't care about me, you don't listen. That's their experience. Doesn't take away the fact that I'm validating myself too as a parent. I tried my best to take the time to listen to her. I was present with her. You know, so both of these things can be true at once. Oftentimes when we go to our parents and we share about, you know, our experience of childhood, they're going to be stuck in their way. And if they agree with us, it's like as if they're like invalidating their experience, which isn't true. You know, how you felt as a parent is valid, and how a child feels is also valid. Like, both of these things can be true at once.
Well, both of those beliefs, they coexist, because it's two different individuals experiencing life and the world in their own unique way. So both are true. And so, you know, what we're talking about here is containment. And so, well, most of us.
Just a side note, back to when you were talking about like large families, that's why each child also within a large family will experience their childhood differently, right? Every single child, because we're each so unique. So even if like you have a sibling and you experience things different, because each of us experience things differently, and we have no way of knowing how our child will experience something.
Well, as a matter of fact, and I've even said this too, I've had clients where I've encouraged them to go and discuss these very delicate topics with their siblings, right? Because chances are they're going to get a fresh perspective. They're going to get a very unique perspective, and they typically do. I've had the experience where they come back and they're like, I talked to my sister, and her view of dad is completely different than my view of dad, right? Like dad was like the best for her, right? And for me, he was like not present. He didn't care, blah, 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 blah. It's like, wow. I go, okay, so you've got 6 other siblings. Here's your assignment. Go back. And the thing is, we were never taught to be vulnerable. We were never taught to communicate effectively. Just like you said, we don't go to school to learn how to effectively communicate with others, right? And so really, what's the big facet that's difficult? You mentioned the word failed, right? So what happens when I'm the container and I'm holding space for my child or for anybody else, okay? And as I sit there compassionately holding space for my child, the human being that I love the most, and they start to criticize me, or I feel criticized, then what's being triggered, like you said, that hurtful to our ego, okay, the biggest fear, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest fear for any parent is to fail their child as a parent, okay, to feel as though they let them down and disappointed them and failed. So any criticism, anything that is weighing on the child, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard, I didn't feel like I could express myself, okay? And the parent has to listen to that. Like, first of all, they have to sit there and listen without going, but wait. No, it wasn't like that. No, but I think you saw it differently, but your father and I, we really loved you. We loved you. Like, that's how I was. I can distinctly remember even my mother saying, well, we love you, right? And I'm like, how about I love you? Is it, like, I don't know. There's a slight difference, but it does actually mean the world. So I think that the ability to sit and hold that space for our child and truly listen to what they have to say is probably the biggest challenge for most parents. You tell me.
I believe so, because also parenting involves a lot of giving. And so we are giving a lot, and we've taken this role. We decided to have kids, so we are giving. And perhaps we have this expectation of, oh, my child is going to, be grateful, or is going to thank me one day, and then they come and they tell us, it was really hard for me this childhood. So yeah, it could really sting. It could really hurt. And it is the most important thing we will ever do in our life, is to be a parent. So I completely agree with what you said, for sure. It is the most important. And I think if we've, haven't been there for the way our child needs us, it's painful to hear that.
So this is where we can get into some practical applications for the parents listening, right? When it comes to being that container, okay? When it comes to holding space for our child, right? And first of all, recognizing that the reason we, and I use the universal we as humans and as parents have the propensity to be defensive and want to shut down the conversation by defending ourselves, right? It's just, first of all, recognizing that what's being triggered is you feeling like you failed. Okay, so first of all, them criticizing you in any way is them basically saying you failed as a parent. Okay, so first, if you can just kind of slide that over, you can just kind of, as I slide that over for a minute and remove that personal attack that you're feeling as a parent. What advice would you give them for holding space? Twofold. Number one is holding the space should the child actually feel comfortable to say anything to you in the first place. And then number two, if your children have never said anything to you in that sense, inviting that opportunity. All right, so Sterna, what I want to do is give our parents some practical application moving forward. So twofold. Number one is when should your child come to you to express themselves vulnerably and to potentially share something that makes them uncomfortable, or criticize that, or make them feel criticized in any way, how to hold that space effectively for their children. And then number two, if their children aren't coming to them at all, there's probably a good possibility that they're not uncomfortable. So how can they invite them, right, to open up and then create that safe space for them?
I love those questions. So to the first question you mentioned, we have to understand that if a child comes to us with something that affected them through their childhood, it's not taking away all the wonderful things we've provided them also. It doesn't mean that it's invalidating all the efforts and everything that we did give them in their childhood. And if we want to hear about that, we could also ask, right? Did you also want to share with me the positive aspects that benefited you from our childhood together, from your childhood with me? So, just reminding ourselves on that moment, right? My child is sharing this with me, and it doesn't take away from all the moments, memories that we also created together. And also, if you feel like you're not in a good space to have that conversation, it's okay to tell your child, I actually really want to hear everything you have to share in regards to this. And I also, right now is not a good time for me. Can I let you know when to have this conversation together? So you can take the time to ground yourself and choose a time where you really feel capable of listening to your child and really reminding yourself to put aside, the need to fix or the need to prove yourself, and choose a better time to have that discussion while showing your child, this really matters to me. That's why I want to choose a better time, because this conversation is so important to me. And I want to make sure that I'm capable of really taking the time with you. So let's set up a different time. I'll let you know when it's good for me. So never to feel like on that moment has to be the moment, even if you're feeling dysregulated, So
so then if that's the case, right? So let's just imagine that the parent is getting this information and now they don't know exactly how to deal in the moment. So how would you tell them what's the most effective way to hold that space for their child?
Yeah, like I said before, kids have the answers for us. So we can ask them, do you want me to listen to everything you're sharing and then share my perspective? Or do you just want to talk about your perspective? Do you want to understand where I was coming from when I did what I did? Not saying that what I did was okay, but do you want to have an understanding of what was going on in my life then? Because oftentimes the way we treat our children have to do with our inner world, right? Like, for example, my father being divorced, being single, all of that affected the way he treated me. I'm not a reflection of the way he treated me. His inner world, what was going on for him. So if a child comes to us and shares with us, whatever that is they want to share from their childhood, ask them, did you want to understand where I was coming from? Or do you just want to share with me your perspective? Do you want to share with me do you want me to share with you how I remember that experience? Not taking away your experience and your memory of it. I just could share the way I experienced it. Ask your child, is this what you want from this conversation? Ask them, what do you want to gain from this conversation? Do you just want me to hear you? Is that good enough for you? They will have the answers to what. Does that answer the first question?
Totally. And the last thing is they will have the answer. Okay. So
they will have the answer.
They will have the answer. So first of all, that was perfect. Okay. So anyone listening right now can actually take exactly what Sterna just shared with you and use it, because what it's doing is it's validating 100% your child. Okay. By asking them what you want from me is making that amends almost immediately. Like in that moment, you're actually making that amends because you're asking them, what do you need from me? Do you need me to listen? Because I'll just listen. Okay. Or do you want me to explain, what happened, or explain from my point of view? You tell me what you need from me. And that's going to change the dynamic immediately. So now, as far as just inviting them to have that conversation, right? What do some of those questions look like?
You're cutting off a lot. You're cutting off a lot, but I kind of heard what you said. And I just want to go back and say that we don't have to wait till our kids are old and finish their childhood to have such conversations. If we have an 8-year-old, we could sit down with them and say, hey, I want to know, like, do you feel like I'm here for you? And just have that conversation at any stage. It's, ongoing conversations. So no matter how old our child is, even my 3-year-old, right? I can say, oh, when you're really angry and upset, do you like it when I sit next to you? Is that something you like? Do you want me to hug you? What feels good for you? Right. So yeah, any age that our child has. Now back to the second question you mentioned, bringing up this conversation to our child. The first thing is, the best conversations are when we are connected with our child. Don't wait to have friction and then share this conversation. You know what I mean? Try to have it in a time where we feel connected to our child. Do you hear me?
I'm here.
Okay, fine. No, I didn't know if it was cutting off or not. Okay. So, a time where we feel connected to our child and just asking them, if let's say they're older, we could say, all these years, I was your parent and I only know how I experienced that. And I would love to hear how you experience it on your end. Is this something you want to share with me? I would love to hear and talk about this.
Perfect. So with that, because there's this really is what we discussed here at the end is two topics. One is effective communication, and the other one is compassionately holding space for your child without being defensive. I think that really that's the most. If I don't allow my humanness, right, and my frailty as a human, because really that's what it is, my delicate, frail human self that feels as though I'm failing as a parent because my child is telling me something that is bringing them discomfort or is making them not feel good in any way, shape, or form. Instead of removing that delicate human aspect of myself, of me being a failure, and just going, oh, wow, my child is actually trying to communicate with me. And if we reframe it as like, no, I'm not a failure. Okay, I'm actually a success. Because if my child feels comfortable enough to come and talk to me, I'm winning. Okay, I've created space enough for them to feel comfortable to tell me things that they're uncomfortable with. That's being a successful parent. So I'd like to just kind of reframe that belief system, and then also say that there's probably a gazillion other things that you could get from Sterna if you connect with her. So Sterna, if my listeners want to connect with you, right, either personally or to follow you, what's the best way for them to connect with you and to follow you?
They can go on my website, sternasuissa.com. And there's a contact me over there that you can contact me, write me a message. That's probably the best way.
And of course, your Instagram, which is?
On Instagram, I share things. I try to share as often as I can. Otherwise, I also offer a parenting community actually off of my website, where every month we meet up, we have discussions. There's courses that I add every single month. There's a ton of topics. You can pick and choose what you want to hear. They're bite-sized because I know how busy we are as parents. So it's very straight to the point. There's course notes, scripts, ideas for effective communication, and a lot of different interesting things that I believe all parents can benefit from. Yeah, and your what you mentioned before is very, very powerful, because a lot of times parents will reach out to me when, their child is acting in alarming ways, like being angry with them, um, showing a lot of anger or being hurt, and the parent sees it. And I always start off by saying, like, what a blessing that is, that your child's not keeping that inside their body and hiding it from you. Like, that in itself shows me how comfortable your child feels with you. And I know it feels unpleasant as a parent to be on the receiving end of it, but it truly is such a blessing. There's so many kids out there that choose not to show their parents this side of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So Sterna, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners before we close up?
Final words of wisdom. Our kids, I believe all kids love us unconditionally. That's the truth. As much as we also need to, the child really does love us unconditionally. If you don't know what to do, if you're in a situation and you don't know how to be with your child and what to do, just stay present. Just stay there. Just being there with your child is good enough. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to do anything. Just staying there with your child and saying, I see this is hard for you and I'm right here, is good enough, for a child to feel that we're present with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So Sterna, real quick, because your Instagram is so big, what's your Instagram handle?
Sterna Suissa.
Okay, perfect. She's just Sterna Suissa everywhere. I'll have that
exactly.
I'll have that in the show notes, folks, so you can check those out. How are you spelling Suissa?
Suissa.
Okay, follow her. She's got great content. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure having this conversation together.
All right. I think we'll be doing a part 2 here. This is so much fun. Loved it. All right.
Omar, I was going to ask you, because you also have a daughter. No, I saw that you have a daughter.
19 years old. Yes.
Oh, wow. That's so nice. I wish you would have shared some of that, like on the podcast too.
Okay. So I think we're going to have to do a part 2 because there's nothing I enjoy more than talking about my daughter.
Oh my gosh. And honestly, it's actually, I think also parents on my end would love to hear, because a lot of the parents on my end are parenting younger kids, and you have a 19-year-old, so that can bring like so much value to parenting discussion.
Yes. No, she saved my life in many, many ways. She saved my life when she was born. She saved my life in many, many ways. So yeah. So part 2 to come, folks. Well, Sterna and I will be talking about our children.
Omar, are you keeping this on recording?
Oh yeah, this is still recording.
Stop. Oh my gosh.